If you want to open an IUL or an index universal life policy and your goal is to use it as a savings vehicle to have your money grow faster, but you are not using a max funded IUL, then you are doing it wrong. Think of it this way. If you are going to buy an apartment building, let's say there's 10 different units in that apartment, and your goal is to make money from this apartment. Now, in order for this apartment to keep running, you have to pay that mortgage. And let's say it only takes 2 tenants in order for that mortgage to be paid. Now, if your goal is to make money with this apartment building, are you going to just get the 2 tenants that are needed to keep your mortgage paid? Or are you gonna fill up that apartment with 10 tenants so that you are making the most amount of money possible with that apartment? This same idea and principle applies when it comes to an IUL. Filling up that apartment building with 10 units is a max funded IUL, whereas just putting enough tenants to get the mortgage paid is a regular IUL. In this video, I'm going to walk you through what exactly a max funded IUL is, how to make sure that the person that is building this for you is in fact getting you a max funded IUL, and what to do in the event that you cannot get one. If this is the first time that we are meeting, my name is Nobu Musekiwa. I help working professionals 40 and over grow their money faster and pay less taxes by leveraging cash value life insurance like an IUL. If that sounds like you and you'd like to work with me to open your IUL, go ahead and check out the link in the comments. Now, every single IUL is custom made for every individual, but it's going to essentially work the same, which is you decide how much it is you are putting in on a monthly basis. Part of that money goes towards paying for the life insurance. Then anything above and beyond that goes towards going into this cash bucket. With every IUL, there is a bare minimum that you need to put in order for this policy to continue to be provided to you. And then there's also a maximum amount that you can put into that account before the IRS starts taxing you and deeming this account as not life insurance, but rather an investment. And so everybody's minimum and maximum is going to be different depending on your age, your health, and how much it is that you have shared that you want to contribute on a regular basis into this IUL. Now, let's go back to that building that we were talking about. So if we know that we have this building and the long-term goal is that we want this building to keep paying us money and make us money in the long term, if we just rent out the least amount of people that are needed to pay this mortgage, that will be like only paying the minimum amount needed in order for this policy to continue to keep going. And that'll work, that'll keep your policy going, but that's not going to grow your money because you don't have any money going into that cash bucket, right? So if we have our building and instead of putting 2 tenants, we put in 5, 6, 8, or even the full 10, then everything above those 2 that are going to cover that mortgage is money that's going into our account that we're saving, that we're banking, that we can take out and use later. So similarly in an IUL, everything that you're putting in above that minimum is going into your cash bucket. It's growing interest. And over time, as that interest is applied to your balance that is growing, that's what causes your funds to continue to grow exponentially. But you might say, okay, but if I can just pay the bare minimum and keep it going like that, what is the problem? Okay. You may never have owned a building before, but I think you can understand this concept. Let's say we've had this building for 2 years. We've always had just 2 tenants. We are not putting in any extra money on the side because we don't have extra tenants to do that. What happens now on year 3 when one of those tenants stops paying? All of a sudden, we are scrambling because there is nowhere for us to go to get extra funds to actually pay our mortgage. And unfortunately, we are going to go ahead and lose that building, and that is not good. This is the same thing that can happen with your IUL as well. So if you're only putting in the bare minimum, that means that there is nothing that is going into that savings bucket. That means when you have a situation where you have a sudden loss of funds, let's say you get laid off and you no longer pay in the minimum that you're required, because there's nothing in that cash bucket, your policy is going to end right away. Whereas if you were max funding your IUL, you'd have tons of extra money in there. So if it took you a year, 2 years, 3 years to find a new job, there could be enough money in that cash bucket to continue to pay for your policy. So that's benefit number 1 of having a max funded IUL, is that you have extra money in there. So like if there's an emergency, it can be used as a Hail Mary to keep your policy going. But more importantly, the more funds that you have in your cash bucket, the more funds that you have in there sooner, the more interest is going to be applied to it and the more your money is going to grow, right? If you only have $100 in your cash bucket because you're putting in the bare minimum, then you're only making $7. But if you max funded this thing and you have $10,000 in there, then that year you're actually making $700. And that's just from 1 year. As the money continues to grow, then how much is being credited to you is going to grow as well, which means that your backup money in the event that you need funds in there to pay for your policy, then you are all set. This is especially important if your goal is to use this account for retirement income. You don't want to be in a place where you are ready to retire, but there's no money in your cash bucket, not only for you to pull from, but for you to even pay for the policy. This would mean that that minimum amount that you have put into it is eventually going to get lost if you do not have the funds to continue to maintain this policy. The goal for you is to max fund this and have this paid up as soon as possible so that the money continues to grow in itself. So you not only have room to pull money out, but you also have room for the funds that are growing to pay for the policy itself. And you just end up coasting and making the most out of compound interest. If you are specifically interested in using an IUL to supplement your retirement income, I have a free course walking you through exactly how that works and why it may or may not be a good idea for you. So go ahead and check out the link in the comments if you would like access to that free course. So if you're ready to talk to an IUL specialist to open your IUL, how do you actually make sure that they are creating this IUL in a way that it is in fact max funded? There are a couple of ways that you as a regular person can take a look and see whether or not this IUL is created in a way where you can max fund it or whether it is not built out in the most optimal manner. The easiest way for you to do this is to go ahead and look at the illustration. When an IUL is built out for you, the person that is building it out is required to send an illustration in to the insurance carrier that shows like what is the projected growth for this account. When you're signing your policy documents, you will have a copy of that illustration. You want to go ahead and look at what is the projected funds that are going to be in your cash bucket. If you see multiple zeros in that column, so if you see year 1 0, year 2 0, year 3 0, year 4 0, that is an example of an account that is not max funded. If the account is built out correctly, there should be funds available for you to pull out by year 2. That doesn't mean that you should pull out funds. That doesn't mean it's going to be a large amount of funds. But if you're just looking and you have more than 1 0 in your projected accumulated cash, then there is something wrong with the way that is built out. It is not max funded. Another good way for you to look to see if the account is max funded is to look at what the maximum amount that you can put in each year before the IRS triggers this account and asks you to pay taxes. This is called your MEC number, like MEC. If your MEC is way higher than what you plan on putting in, then there's something wrong. So let's say you plan on putting in $5,000 a year, but your MEC is $30,000. There's a big gap between $5,000 and $30,000, which means that you are paying for way more insurance than what you actually need. That essentially is what max funded means. And max funded means that we are getting the smallest amount of insurance needed in order for you to complete your goal. And you're also going to be putting in as much money as possible to make sure that you're close to that MEC number as possible. And so if it's built out in a way where there's no way that you're going to be able to meet that MEC comfortably, that's an indicator that this is not a max funded IUL. It's not built out in the way that is most advantageous for your money growth. And we don't want that. If it would be helpful to have a checklist of items that you want to look out for to make sure that your IUL is built correctly, go ahead and drop the comment checklist below, and if I get enough comments, and I will create that for y'all. Now, what if you are fully aware that the ideal goal is to max fund this IUL, but for right now, you don't have the capacity to put in that much money into this IUL? While, it is best to max fund your IUL, it is also important to balance that out with getting in as soon as possible, because there is a misconception that an index universal life policy is an account that you can just open if you want it, but it is a life insurance policy. And with life insurance carriers, they want to make sure that they're making money. And so they don't make money if they give you this policy and then tomorrow, you pass away. And so there is an application process. And if in their checks with your health and your criminal history, they find that you are risky, as in there's a high probability that you are not going to live for a long time based on their math, then they're not going to give you this policy. The younger you are and the healthier that you are, the more likely that you're going to get approved. And so You don't necessarily want to wait until you are rich, right, to get in. You want to get in as soon as possible. You're not going to be any younger than you are today. So if you know you want one of these policies, you do want to get in. And as long as you are not putting in the bare minimum, then you will be fine, right? So the bare minimum is the amount that you need in order for your policy to just keep going. You want to put in more than that. And as long as you understand that in the future you want to push to put more in, that's perfectly fine. So when you're building out this IUL, you can build it out so there is a comfortable amount that you can put in, but it's not the bare minimum, but you also have room to put more in down the line. So if this is the bare minimum that causes the policy to just float by, you don't want to open an account with that. You want to at least be in the middle, but the ideal is that you're putting in like close to the top as possible. So the answer is, if you are not able to max fund it right now, open the account because you're not getting any younger, and the older that you are, the more expensive that it is, and the more likely that you're going to be sicker, which means that there's a higher probability that you will not be approved. And then put in at least like a mid amount into that. The agent or the broker that is working with you will work with you to figure out what that number is. If you want to work with me, link is in the description. And then, as you get more funds, if you get a tax refund, you can put more in there to make sure that you are getting as close to that top number as possible. An IUL can still work well for you if it's not max funded, but there are a few things that need to be in place in order for that to happen. In this video, I'll walk you through what those things are, and we'll look at actual specific numbers for a real person so you can get an idea of what happens when you get an IUL, not minimally funded, right? Mid-funded, and you do a few things to make sure that it gives you the best results possible. I'll see you there.